Now, as a crafter, I've made a ton of unwise purchases in the past. I often watched my favorite crafters on YouTube and saw their ink collections and was so envious of all of their ink pads. I heard the word full set syndrome and automatically thought that this term justified my purchase of an entire collection of inks. Today, I'm here to help you ask the right questions and to let you know what to take into consideration when choosing your ink pads. The first thing you need to decide when deciding on your ink pads are full-size ink pads or mini ink cubes. Now, mini inks were introduced to the market several years ago. Of course, they are really amazing because they're easy to store, they don't take up as much space. The small size and the small price allowed a lot of customers to really amplify their ink collection, invest in more colors, and be able to have a wider variety in their craft room. Now, mini inks, keep in mind, do contain about a quarter of the amount of ink that full-size pads do. So be sure to check out my video on whether or not you need ink refills, because if you invest in the mini cubes, you're going to need ink refills quicker than you do with the full-size pads. Now, if you head over to my blog, you are welcome to check out the free download I have on the ink pads that I've personally used in the industry and the pros and cons for each one. It's a free download available for everyone who'd like to check it out. Do you need a refill? We've already discussed this in one of the previous videos, so I'm not going to go too much into detail here. But I do want to mention something that I didn't mention in that video. There are companies that do not produce ink refills. So if having an ink refill is important to you, and when your ink pad runs out of ink that you're able to refill it, then you might want to decide on a brand of ink that actually comes with ink refills. Have you checked online reviews? Have you watched a YouTube tutorial? Have you seen them in action in person? Remember, it's quality versus quantity that you want in your craft room. There's no sense in having 50 different type of ink pads that you bought for $1 when they don't work properly. It's just going to lead to frustration. One thing that you can do if you're unsure is to buy one ink pad and give it a test drive before buying an entire set. Another thing that you can do is watch YouTube reviews. The reason why I say YouTube reviews and not reviews written on websites or on Instagram is because you can actually see the ink stamping in person without having to be there live. You can see whether an ink stamp's splotchy or whether the person needs to ink up so many times in order to get a good impression. The next thing about ink colors or ink pads is, are there coordinating supplies, and which coordinating supplies are important to you? Another thing that might be important for you is that they have coordinating envelopes so that your inks match the envelope, match the card base. Now, some companies take it even a step further, and they've come out with sprays or watercolor markers that match your ink pads. My next step is brand versus color versus full set syndrome. Did you know that most of the ink pads that are made in the USA are manufactured by the same company? This means that the ink formula that you're getting is the same across the brands. I'm not saying every brand is made by the same manufacturer, but the majority of them are, which is why you actually see a lot of your ink pad cases are the same shape and size. So I always tell people, focus on the colors that you need and not necessarily the brand of inks. So this is another reason why I discourage having the whole idea of full set syndrome and needing all the ink pads from a certain brand. Another reason is because there may be colors that you stamp in more and there may be colors that you stamp in less. So I know when I'm investing in an ink pad line, I automatically gear towards the rainbow vibrant colors. It's very rare, aside from stamping leaves, that I use green, and I never really use brown. So those are colors that I can save money on. The next thing is, be realistic about your usage and consider how long you've been doing this hobby for. Now, I don't know about you, but I've started a lot of craft hobbies, and there are few of those hobbies that I've actually stuck with over the years. So if you're new to stamping, I would suggest that you buy a few ink pads to start off with and make sure that this hobby is something you're going to stick with before investing a ton of money in a huge range of colors. Another consideration are felt pads or foam pads. I go into a little bit more detail in my Do You Need an Ink Refill video about felt and foam, but essentially it's a personal choice of what you prefer. And I always say, if you're heavy-handed, I definitely recommend the felt because it's more of a heavy-duty ink pad, although you might need to push a little harder to get that ink out of it. And if you're not heavy-handed, consider buying a foam pad. You just need to tap lightly and you get full coverage every time, even on solid stamps. And generally, I would say it doesn't really matter at all whether it's felt or foam if you plan on using a stamping tool of some sort, because whether or not you get a good impression the first time is irrelevant because you can stamp in the same spot more than once. So probably the most important thing is which type of ink. Dye-based, pigment-based, archival, amalgam. There are so many new words, especially for beginners. The best thing to do is read the packaging to see what they're manufactured for, or Google them on the website and see what they're made for. If you're unsure of which type of ink you should go for, be sure to check out this video here in which I explain all the different types of ink and what they're best for. So good luck choosing an ink pad. If you have any questions about the ink pads, be sure to comment below and head over to my blog for the free download on the different types of ink pads that I've worked with in the past and what I think of them. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.